My dear colleagues, judges of the Supreme Court, the Honorable Chief Justices of the High Courts, the Supreme Court of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, the Chief Judge of the Supreme Appellate Court of Gilgit-Baltistan, the Honorable Judges of the High Courts of Pakistan, the Honorable Judicial Officers of the District Judiciary, learned Additional Attorney General, members of the Bar, Excellencies, the Ambassadors and High Commissioners of friendly states, representatives of the United Nations agencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I welcome all of you to the 9th International Judicial Conference on the Administration of Justice, 75 years reflecting on the past and looking towards the future, organized by the Law and Justice Commission of Pakistan. We meet today at a somber time for the nation, with the recent floods wreaking havoc on the people and the country's infrastructure. To show our solidarity with those affected by the floods, we have arranged our bank at the Supreme Court to receive donations for the relief effort from participants of the conference, including myself. Despite the hardships facing the nation today, the stakeholders in the justice sector have come together to reflect on the solutions for improving the legal system for litigants. Therefore, it is my sincere hope that this conference will, inshallah, broaden our understanding and vision for building a more efficient, effective and rights-based justice sector, which will accomplish the constitutional objective of delivering substantive justice to the people of Pakistan inexpensively and expeditiously. The panel discussions scheduled for the conference are spread across 5 broad thematic areas. Our panel today has been asked to speak on the role of the judiciary in maintaining the rule of law and upholding the supremacy of the Constitution. Considering the depth of the subject matter and the shortness of time available, the task is arduous. At first sight, the proposed topic seemingly suggests that courts are indeed the principal agents for preserving the rule of law and defending the Constitution in our country. But the interests that inhere in these goals make the process complex. For the judiciary to truly maintain the rule of law and uphold the supremacy of the Constitution, it needs to be stated at the outset that the active support of the constitutional organs, the stakeholders in the justice sector, and the people of Pakistan are necessary. The concept of rule of law, as we understand it today, encompasses the authority of the state to exercise its power within the bounds of trichotomy of powers, equality before the law, subject to differentiations permitted on the touchstone of reasonable classification, and protection of the fundamental rights guaranteed to the people. In a nation like ours, which is governed by a written constitution, the content of rule of law is given substance by our constitution. In the Yusuf Raza Gilani case of 2012, this court observed, the court can only strengthen the rule of law by upholding the Constitution, which is, in fact, the supreme law. The Constitution of Pakistan represents the ideals and aspirations of the people as recorded in the Objectives Resolution. These ideals and aspirations inter alia are establishment of democracy, grant of fundamental rights, and independence of the judiciary. Indeed, in the District Bar Association Rawalpindi case of 2015, these ideals and aspirations have been recognized by the court as the salient features of the Constitution, which Parliament has no power to repeal, abrogate, or substantively alter. These values are consequently infused into the very fabric of Pakistan and comprise features of the rule of law that exist or ought to exist in the country. For its part, the court has endeavored to remain faithful to the command of the Constitution by attempting to establish a rule of law that grants not only procedural due process to the people of Pakistan, but also protects their fundamental rights promised by the Constitution. Such rights are predominantly civil and political in nature and therefore are secured by imposing negative restrictions on the state, not to interfere in their exercise by the people, subject to, of course, reasonable restrictions imposed by law for national or public purposes. However, the jurisprudence of the court, particularly under Article 9 of the Constitution, which guarantees security to persons by ensuring that they are not deprived of their life or liberty save in accordance with law, has developed the protections provided by these fundamental rights to also include social and economic rights, which impose positive obligations on the state to improve the lives of the people in the light of the changing conditions and the needs of society. A relatively recent example of the court progressively and dynamically interpreting Article 9 in such manner is visible in the Nematullah Khan case of 2020 Supreme Court, wherein it is observed that the right to life enshrined in Article 9 now includes the provision of drinking water, electricity, education, health facilities, civic and civil infrastructure, and transportation to the people. This list may grow further, or this list will certainly grow further with the passage of time and should not be regarded as exhaustive by any means. It may have been noticed that the enforcement of rule of law in the country is linked with the rights and interests that the court identifies and upholds under the Constitution. As custodians of the Constitution and guardians of the people's fundamental rights, the court is acutely aware of the onerous duty imposed on it by the Constitution to nurture a society infused with the rule of law, in which no adverse action is taken against any citizen without the backing of law. The expanding jurisprudence of the court is a testament to its commitment to realize this ideal and aspiration of the Constitution. However, the jurisdiction is not limited to merely enforcing fundamental rights of a litigant or a class of litigants under the Constitution. The court also has an appellate jurisdiction in respect of disputes under the general law of the land. The enforcement of such laws comes before the court for consideration and application. In performing its roles, the primary effort of the court is to achieve a balance in the relationship between the state and its people, and a balance between the people themselves in the other set of disputes, to create a society that is striving to accomplish the ideals and aspirations set out in the objective resolution. It is this balance which forms the critical essence of the rule of law, and that essence is the court's duty to secure. National values of public interest strongly indicate that the balance usually lies in favor of the people, but occasionally it requires the curtailment within reasonable limits of fundamental rights of the people for the collective good. Nevertheless, whatever the outcome of a case, the court's ultimate adjudicatory exercise is always focused to ensure the maintenance of a robust rule of law in the country. To ensure the meaningful protection of the rule of law to all citizens is a statement made in Benazir Bhutto's case in the year 1988. It opened the doors of its original jurisdiction under Article 184(3) to all and sundry by relaxing the procedural rules of locus standi that were being applied in the past. Due to this liberal interpretation, the fundamental rights of many vulnerable and marginalized groups have been enforced by the court on account of petitions filed by public-spirited persons. An example can be seen in Salman Akram Raja's case of 2013, in which the petitioners had challenged the practice of accused charged with rape obtaining acquittals by reaching out-of-court settlements with the victims and/or their families. The court, taking cognizance of the matter, issued wide-ranging guidelines for the proper investigation and prosecution of rape matters, while also declaring that rape to be a non-compoundable offense. Again, in Muhammad Aslam Khaki's case in the year 2013, the court exercised its original jurisdiction to issue identity cards to transgenders. In suo motu case number 1 of 2014, the court took notice of the suffering of religious minorities and directed the federal government to constitute a task force for developing a strategy of religious tolerance in the country. In the petition regarding miserable conditions of schools in the year 2014, the court, to enforce Article 25A of the Constitution, which mandates the state to provide free and compulsory education to children between the age of 5 and 16, they directed the provinces and the Islamabad Capital Territory to set up accreditation boards to improve the conditions of schools by removing ghost schools and taking penal action against the absentee teachers. Apart from enforcing the fundamental rights of marginalized groups in society, the court has also delivered landmark judgments to reinforce other dimensions of the rule of law. In this respect, the court has come a long way to become a champion for the cause of democracy in the country. Indeed, by burying the doctrine of necessity, which in the past had been resorted to justify the imposition of martial law in the country, the court in Sindh High Court Bar Association case of 2009 helped to usher in the current era of uninterrupted democratic rule in the country. Recently, the court had to intervene after the President ordered the dissolution of the National Assembly in April 2022 on the advice of the then Prime Minister. The court found the dissolution to be unconstitutional and ordered that the National Assembly be restored for the formation of a parliamentary government in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. This was because the Constitution bars the dissolution of the National Assembly during the pendency of a no-confidence motion against the Prime Minister. As a result of this decision, the detailed reasons of which are reported in the Pakistan People's Party parliamentarian case in 2022, the country witnessed for the first time since 1973, when our present constitution was enacted, a peaceful transition of executive power within one term of the National Assembly. Subsequently, the then Deputy Speaker of the Punjab Assembly on 22 July 2022 issued a ruling contrary to the provisions of the Constitution. The court again intervened to render a correct interpretation of the Constitution. Nevertheless, regardless of the efforts of the court to strengthen democracy in the country, progress can only be made if all political parties come together to follow the established democratic practices and perform their respective roles in Parliament under the Constitution. A purely political impasse does not have legal solutions. It can only be resolved through dialogue between the political leaders and their parties. The judiciary has no role to break a political deadlock. Like other citizens, it is our sincere hope that the political leadership of the country shall take necessary corrective steps and confidence-building measures with public and national interest as their foremost consideration. Moving on, the court has extensively engaged with another emerging dimension of the rule of law, which in recent years has gathered much interest both locally and globally, namely the climate crisis. As far back as in 1994, in Shaila Zia's case, it was recognized that a healthy environment for the well-being of the people was necessary. The court said, in the quest for economic development, one has to adopt such measures which may not create hazards to life, the environment, and pollute the atmosphere. Some 25 years later, in DG Khan's cement case in 2021, realizing that Pakistan is globally ranked in the top 10 countries most affected by climate change, the court categorically recognized climate justice as an essential facet of the rule of law. It was observed, democracy anywhere in the world is pillared on the rule of law, which substantially means rights-based rule of law, which guarantee fundamental values of morality, justice, and human rights with a proper balance between these and other needs of society. Post-climate change democracies have to be redesigned and restructured to become more climate resilient, and the fundamental principle of rule of law has to change. The preambular constitutional value of democracy under our constitution is in effect climate democracy. If we wish to actualize our constitution and the fundamental rights guaranteed under the constitution for ourselves and our future generations. In the wake of the recent floods, which have ravaged around 1/3 of the country and displaced millions of people, most of whom already belong to the vulnerable segments of society, the decision of the court is a wake-up call to the legislature and the executive to take immediate action to mitigate the pernicious effects of climate change on the people. The court has also been active in dispensing social, economic, and cultural justice to the people, which is an often forgotten and relegated feature of the rule of law. For instance, to promote Urdu, which is the national language of Pakistan under Article 251 of the Constitution, the court in Muhammad Kaukab Iqbal case in the year 2015 directed the federal and provincial governments to implement without unnecessary delay the directives of Article 251, namely that Urdu be used for official and other purposes. The court reminded the government that Article 251 is not a standalone provision. That this provision is directly linked to the realization of various fundamental rights protected by the Constitution, especially the right to dignity, Article 14, the right to equal treatment under law, Article 25, and the right to education, Article 25A. It is a corollary of the person's right to dignity enshrined in the Constitution that his or her language, national or provincial, should be respected and recognized by the state which exercises authority over him or her. Likewise, it is a corollary of a person's right to equality that he or she must not be denied access to economic and political opportunities because he or she is only conversant in the languages recognized and referred to in Article 251 and not conversant with the English language. In the human rights case 17599 of 18, reported in the year 2019, the court took suo motu cognizance of the alarming population growth in the country and noted its adverse effects on the social and economic development of the nation. It observed that fundamental rights such as the right of free speech or information are of no use to those struggling with malnutrition, hunger, and starvation. Economic prosperity is thus a sine qua non for the implementation of all fundamental rights, the paramount right being that of life. The task force constituted on the direction of the court made several recommendations for managing the population boom. However, we are disappointed that progress on that matter has stalled. The court proposes to revisit these proceedings to focus the energies of the state and the society on this crucial priority. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as the concept of rule of law has matured over the years, so have the essential features that comprise it. Therefore, good governance, which is generally understood to be synonymous with sound executive management of state functions, is now also regarded as one such feature of the rule of law. Good governance has great importance in safeguarding people's economic fundamental rights. This is evident from the court's pronouncements in Muhammad Yasin's case in the year 2012. It has been observed correctly by the court in Tariq Azizuddin's case in 2010 that good governance in the country is largely dependent upon an upright, honest, and strong bureaucracy. The jurisprudence of the court has therefore developed in two directions. Firstly, by promoting merit and competition in the appointments made to the service of Pakistan, and secondly, as an offshoot of the first category, by protecting the public assets of the state from waste and plunder. In respect of the case law emanating under the former category, the court has consistently held since 1993 that appointments to public offices must be made on the principles of transparency and publicity and competition. An analysis of the court's case law is recently carried out in the Hidayatullah case in 2022, wherein the Sacked Employees Reinstatement Act 2010 was declared ultra vires the Constitution for allowing reinstatements of employees to the service of Pakistan, contrary to settled principles of due process for establishing merit, non-discrimination, transparency, and fairness. The court took this strict view to ensure that people are served only by duly qualified and meritorious public officers. However, keeping in view the length of service rendered by the employees, an opportunity was granted to those employees who fulfilled the prescribed conditions.
आप देख रहे हैं चीफ जस्टिस ऑफ पाकिस्तान उमर बंदियाल कॉन्फ्रेंस कर रहे थे, जिसमें उन्होंने कहा कि मैं अक़वामी जुडिशल कॉन्फ्रेंस के कामयाब इनेकाद पर मुबारकबाद देता हूँ। हालिया सैलाब से पाकिस्तान में शदीद तबाही हुई। कॉन्फ्रेंस में शरीक तमाम मंदूमीन का खैर मकदम करता हूँ।